For a record 6 years now, Squarespace has been helping me turn my dream into reality, and that's what Squarespace does for millions of other people too. Their industry-leading website creation tools help millions of people start new careers, build new businesses, or just get things done. They're offering a special discount to viewers of this channel, so stick around to the end of the video to learn more. Now that the Claire Obscure video is out, we can finally start talking about other things, and where better to start than the Switch 2. I know it's been out for nearly a month now, but the truth is, I wanted to spend some proper time with it before covering it, since I think that it's a more subtle product than we're used to from Nintendo, and on the one hand, that's fine, but on the other hand, it's also kind of a bummer. I mean, this is the company that put out the Virtual Boy, and the Nintendo DS, and the Nintendo 64 controller, a console with a carry handle, and of course, the Donkey Konga bongos. God bless, to this day, no other peripheral has dethroned them. The very name of this thing denotes how safe and incremental it is. This is not the Super Switch, even though that name would have been sick as hell. It hasn't got some entirely new name like the Game Slab. Someone should definitely call a console that one of these days. Soldier Boy, that's on you, buddy. No, this device is called the Switch 2, the clearest, safest, most risk-averse name that Nintendo has ever given to any product it has ever made. And while it's clearly a response to the confusion caused by the Wii U's naming all those years ago, and while it makes sense for them to do this, it's also kind of a bummer because it's cool when Nintendo is weird, and there is nothing at all weird about the Nintendo Switch 2, except for the fact that Nintendo are charging for the welcome tour, but we'll get to that later. The Switch 2 is remarkable in how unremarkable its innovations are. Mouse controls, more power under the hood, a bigger screen, bigger and more powerful everything really. At the end of the day, you could crudely shorthand this to call it the Switch Pro. I don't think that's fair because I do think its many improvements do constitute a generational leap, absolutely. But certainly in speaking to people who aren't living and breathing video games every day, as nerds like us do, most of them are calling it a Switch Pro or something similar to that. They're couching it more in terms of iteration rather than genuine intergenerational evolution. And I can't blame them because I think they're basically right. This isn't like going from a Nokia to an iPhone. Instead, it's like going from an iPhone 10 to an iPhone 16. You know that it's better in every single way, and it can do cool new things that your previous phone couldn't, but it's still ultimately just a better version of a thing that you already had. I wonder though how much we can criticize Nintendo for this, given that this past console generation, we've really hit a design plateau when it comes to most consumer devices. Like, how much better could a laptop or phone be than what Apple is currently making? Tablets are basically as powerful as desktop computers now, but they still look and function the same. Headphones, cameras, smartwatches, the list goes on. The design work feels done, and that's why tech companies are investing so much in wearable technology and augmented reality. That feels like a fresh design frontier because in the current consumer technology landscape, all of the land has already been claimed and mapped and tilled. There's nothing left to conquer. Historically, Nintendo has not been subject to the same pressure, or if they were, they didn't give into it. Nintendo could have just followed Sony's and Xbox's and Sega's lead and delivered a more powerful box, but they rarely did just that. They often lagged behind in terms of hardware performance so they could lap the competition in hardware innovation. And even though stuff like the GameCube undersold and the Wii U bombed spectacularly, those machines really spoke to what Nintendo was all about. Don't give the people what they want, get the people wanting something new. There is no hint of that Nintendo here in this device, and that is lamentable. It's also not cause to diminish what the Switch 2 actually is, and here's where we get to my take, which I've come to learn is actually quite unpopular. Even though the Switch 2 is safe and a little boring, and it's definitely lacking in terms of its launch lineup, I really like it. And I think it's a remarkable device when you consider what it can do and the form factor it's occupying while doing it. I spent a few dozen hours playing my Switch 2 at this point. Most of that was in handheld, but some of it was docked so I could capture some footage and test out the big screen experience. The truth is, during that time, I was always excited to reach for it and really satisfied when I picked it up. For me, it solved what was the biggest drawback of the Switch 1, and that was the screen. The Switch 1 was a fantastically portable device, but I really did find that screen just a touch too small. I could do it at a pinch, but honestly, I've spent most of my time playing the Switch 1 docked because I just didn't feel like I had enough screen real estate when I was in handheld. It's the exact opposite here with the Switch 2. I've mainly been playing handheld because now the screen is a fantastic size. It's 7.9 inches, making it bigger than the Steam Deck 7.4 and the Asus ROG Ally 7 inches. It's a really big screen, to the point where I'm like, you know what? I probably don't need more screen at this point. I'm good. The issue though is something that Digital Foundry reported on soon after launch. The screen's motion clarity is very poor. Pixels aren't being refreshed quickly enough, which can create a blurring effect that's particularly pronounced when scrolling in either gameplay or menu scenarios. I honestly haven't noticed this too much since I've spent most of my time playing 3D games where this is less of an issue, but if you're really big into side scrollers, then you may want to look into this issue in more detail since it's definitely going to affect you. So that's a disappointing aspect that really drags down what is an otherwise extremely impressive product, at least when you're talking about its physical construction. I mean, this thing is 13.9 millimeters thick. Compare that to the Steam Deck OLED at 49 millimeters or the upcoming ROG Xbox Ally at 50.7 millimeters. The Switch 2 is incredibly thin given what it can do. It also weighs only 534 grams, which is about 100 less than the Steam Deck and nearly 200 less than the ROG Xbox Ally. Again, the Switch is incredibly light given what it can do. And it's also basically silent. Like, no matter what I'm playing, I can't hear this thing unless I bring it right up to my ear and listen for the exhaust, and even then it's hard to hear. The Steam Deck is admittedly very quiet for the most part, but the Asus ROG Ally definitely is not. Now, of course, there are very good reasons why these devices all have different weights and form factors and noise levels and whatever. So the point I'm making here is not, Switch 2 good, Steam Deck bad. My point is simply this: as far as a piece of kit goes, the Switch 2 packs a huge amount into a package that is sleek and light and quiet, and even though it has a bigger screen than its competitors, it still feels more portable than its competitors, and that is no small engineering feat. But all of this sleekness does come with a downside: ergonomics. They were bad on the Switch 1, and they are just as bad here. In delivering such a thin, portable device, Nintendo chose not to add ergonomic hand grips, the likes of which the Steam Deck and the ROG Xbox Ally do have. As a result, those devices are infinitely more comfortable to hold despite their bulk. Much has been made of the magnetic connection that now powers the way your JoyCons attach to the console, and to be honest, I don't really care. I thought the slide was fine, this works too, and it's neither here nor there for me. What I was more interested in was the promise of new haptic feedback in the new JoyCons, and to be honest, this is kind of a whiff, I think. I feel like every generation Nintendo promises improved rumble, and yeah, it's always better, but it's never truly noticeable. I compare it to the haptic feedback on the DualSense controller, and that is a genuine game changer. When games use that correctly, I can really feel it. If the Switch 2 JoyCons are capable of the same degree of precise immersive force feedback, none of the games to this point have showcased it, including the Welcome Tour, and that was really the chance to do it better than anything else. The other thing I was really interested in when it came to the Switch 2 JoyCons is the inclusion of mouse control. So right off the top, this functionality works extremely well, surprisingly well. Like, I guarantee you that if you were to ever try these out for yourself, you are going to be very impressed at how responsive and accurate these mouse controls are. So the question then becomes, what do you use these for? And that's where it gets a little more complicated. So obviously, you're never going to use them when you're in handheld mode because you literally can't. You can use them as your primary controls in games like Cyberpunk, where the mouse will let you free aim and it actually works really well. But you do need to be sitting at a table for that to really work properly, since using your thigh the entire time is possible, but it's not very comfortable or accurate. So in my time with the Switch 2, I really haven't used those mouse controls very much at all, and unless I was playing a game like, Civilization 7 and willing to set up my Switch 2 at a desk, then I can't see myself using those mouse controls very often, if at all. I do think it's a nice addition that expands the library of games that the Switch 2 can support, since RTS and strategy games are now perfectly playable on the Switch 2. But I don't know, it feels like people who are interested in those genres are going to be rocking a PC anyway. Battery life. Now, this is a tricky one because, like any other handheld device in the modern era, performance massively changes depending on what you're playing. Here with the Switch 2, it's less average battery life than you get on the Switch 1, absolutely. But every part of this experience is bigger and better, especially game performance. And given that battery technology hasn't evolved substantially in a long time, and given that Nintendo were keen to maintain the device's sleek profile and low weight, it does make sense that battery life suffers. I think it's perfectly valid to be disappointed by this, but I also think we need to recognize that nowadays there are ways around it. I use a power brick that will fully charge my Switch 3 times. And yes, this particular brick is not cheap, and there are cheaper options that will charge it once or twice or whatever. My point is, would I rather the Switch 2 be bigger and bulkier so it could provide me with more battery life? Probably not, in large part because I usually don't need more than 2 to 3 hours of battery life in a single sitting, and also partly because I'm happy to solve that problem with external battery solutions, just as I have long done with my Steam Deck ever since I've been using that. So, taking a step back and looking at the overall physical construction of this device, I can't but be impressed by it despite the fact that it is far from perfect. The screen is big and bright and HDR and 120Hz, but yes, it is an LCD screen, and yes, it does have that pixel refresh issue that Digital Foundry have highlighted. Yes, it is sleek and light and quiet, but it does come at the expense of ergonomics, and the only way to really solve that is with a third-party case. Yes, it's got new magnets and haptics and mouse controls, but the impact of those things is less impressive than we might have hoped for. And yes, it has a bigger battery, technically speaking, but battery life is still less than what we got last generation because this new device is pushing out so much more performance. But here's the bottom line. If you were lucky enough to have picked up a Switch 2 at launch and you've been playing it since then, go back and pick up your old Switch, either the OG Switch or the OLED. That thing feels like shit now. No disrespect to it, thank you for your service, but the Switch 2 feels incredibly premium, and there's no better reminder of that than picking up the Switch 1 and feeling just how far Nintendo have come in their design process. Yes, it is incremental rather than evolutionary, but it's undoubtedly excellent, even with all its drawbacks, and that foundation makes me really excited to use this device more in the future, because Lord knows, there sure as shit isn't much to play right now. There's no denying that when it comes to the Switch 2's launch lineup, it's pretty slim pickings. In fact, there are only 4 launch exclusives, and only one of them feels like a true launch title. The rest are, well, we'll get to them. Let's start with Mario Kart World first. And look, what else can I say about Mario Kart World that hasn't already been said? It's a great video game. It's going to give you dozens of hours of fun alone and potentially hundreds of hours of fun if you're playing online or with friends or family. It's beautiful and technically flawless and full of content, and the knockout mode is the best thing to happen to Mario Kart since they added balloon battles back in the day. It's just a top to bottom great game. The one disappointment within it though has to be its open world, particularly the free roam mode. At first when I was messing about in this and doing all the challenges, I was like, okay, yeah, cool, this is cute, it's fine. They really couldn't have done much else though, could they have? But then someone reminded me of Diddy Kong Racing and its approach to the open world, and at that point I was like, yeah, you know what? You're right. Nintendo definitely could have done more with this game mode, a really fun, playful, single-player campaign that saw you unlocking different parts of the open world by completing challenges and boss races and discovering secrets. That would have been really cool. But hey, like I said, overall, it's still a great game. The $80 thing, man, look, everyone's got their own view on that. I look at it this way though. After having spent time with Mario Kart World and experiencing everything it has to offer, do I sit back and think to myself, yeah, I can see why they charge an extra $10 for this? No, I definitely don't. I'm actually more open to the idea of flexible game pricing than most people are, because I really do think it's a complex topic with lots of variables. But yeah, Mario Kart World does not strike me as the kind of game that needed to be $80. But hey, you've got Microsoft out here charging $80 for Outer Worlds 2, so you can see how bad things are about to get now that Nintendo has opened up these floodgates. The second Nintendo-made Switch 2 exclusive on offer in the launch window is the Welcome Tour. Now, I actually went into this very skeptical that this is a sort of experience that Nintendo should be charging for, and after having now experienced it for myself, they should have paid me $10 to play this. This is the most vapid, interactive infomercial I could imagine enduring. Like, it's just boring. You literally can't progress to the different parts of the game until you've blindly walked around waiting for these invisible lecterns to suddenly pop out of the ground so you can prove to your handler that you've seen every single component within the Switch. You spend all this time reading information about how the Switch 2 works only to be asked inane multiple choice questions about it. It's just so sterile. Like, think of the vast wealth of IP that Nintendo are sitting on, and imagine if they had designed a Nintendo-themed experience that was full of lovable characters and familiar scenarios remixed. Imagine something with some color and joy. Yes, I am basically asking you to imagine Astro's Playroom on the PS5, but just because Sony did it first doesn't mean Nintendo couldn't have one up to them here, pun intended. So yeah, Welcome Tour absolutely sucks on its own merits, and my antipathy toward it is further inflamed by the fact that Nintendo thought it would be a good idea to charge for this. What else we got? Well, there's that Survival Kids game. It's a reboot of a classic franchise that was doing the whole survival thing long before it caught on to the mainstream. I honestly didn't pick this one up, so I can't comment on it, but the reviews I've seen do not a rosy picture paint. The final exclusive is Fast Fusion. If this looks familiar, it's because this same team put out another similar racer on the Switch 1 as a launch title. I actually have a bit of a soft spot for this genre, mainly because I love the music that is often the backbone of these hover racing games. I do think this is good, to be honest, but it's also a budget title in a genre where the feeling of being at the cutting edge of technology and presentation really matters. Like, visually it's okay, but rather than looking truly futuristic, it just sort of looks a bit scrappy, and its soundtrack is not good at all, sadly, which to me is a real deal breaker for this type of game. Playing it, I'm like, okay, this is fine, but it made me remember when I was playing the old Wipeouts and, you know, listening to The Prodigy and Left Field and Pendulum and all the rest, all while being blown away by visuals that look really, really good back then, even though they haven't aged particularly well since. And that's it. That's the first party and exclusive lineup, and I think it's this more than anything else that's to blame for how little excitement there is for the Switch 2. There is no Breath of the Wild like for the Switch, no Soul Calibur 2 like for the Dreamcast, no Halo like for the Xbox. Mario Kart World is cool, but it is not that. The Switch 2 has sold through 3.5 million units in its first 4 days, making it the most successful console launch in the history of video games, but also the least talked about in the sense that there isn't a game on there that's really capturing people's attention and getting them to say to their friends or whatever, hey man, you gotta buy a Switch 2 so you can play this new Switch 2 exclusive game. With so few first-party offerings, you'd think that people would be flocking to third-party games instead, but according to recent reports, third-party games aren't selling, with one publisher saying that their Switch 2 sales were below their lowest expectations for at least one of their releases. For a console with an instant install base of 3.5 million units and very few first-party games to soak up attention, this lack of third-party sell-through is pretty baffling. But in a way, I do kind of get it, because the third-party releases here aren't Switch 2 exclusive third-party games like we typically get when a console launches. They're ports of games that have been out for quite some time now, and in every instance, the ports run worse than they do on the other platforms that they've been playable on for a long while now. Because don't get me wrong, it is truly, truly incredible that CD Projekt Red have been able to squeeze the entirety of Cyberpunk 2077 into a single cartridge, and then get the game and all DLC playable on the Switch 2. It is genuinely impressive stuff, but it's also the worst way to play Cyberpunk, other than the base PS4 and Xbox One, I guess. Recently, PlayStation's boss man Hideaki Nishino said that PS5 level performance is necessary to deliver a good experience on larger screens. And yeah, I mean, I don't think he's wrong. Like, you can nitpick that statement, but generally speaking, he's on the money. I spent plenty of time playing Cyberpunk and Hitman and Yakuza and Street Fighter on the Switch 2, and while it definitely works, and it'd be nice to play some of these games on the go, particularly Yakuza, I often found myself thinking about all the visual fidelity I was sacrificing by playing these games on the Switch 2, instead of on older, cheaper hardware that could deliver me a better visual experience, albeit one that required me to be in front of a TV or monitor. So what's my point? My point is, I never thought the Switch 1 was a good device for playing your average non-Nintendo AAA release, and as impressive as the Switch 2 is, I think this is still the case. If you're someone that only owns Nintendo consoles, then sure, you do now get to go back and enjoy some of the best games from the last generation, and that's really cool, but despite the fact that you're enjoying them later, you're also enjoying them with less visual fidelity than they were intended to be enjoyed at, and that's the trade-off of playing these sorts of games on a handheld. So if I've been playing my Switch 2 this much, but I haven't been playing third-party stuff, and I haven't been no-lifing Mario Kart, then what have I been playing? Well, here's my dirty little secret. Most of my time on the Switch 2 has been spent playing Tears of the Kingdom Switch 2 Edition. Now, this is a complex topic because I know there are certainly those who feel like it's inexcusable for Nintendo to release games with poor frame rates, and it's even more inexcusable to give them a pass for that, while also calling out performance in something like Star Wars Jedi Survivor. But I played Jedi Survivor on like a $5,000 PC, man. There is no excuse for that game running like ass. I played Tears of the Kingdom on a rinky-dink little handheld that could barely load the eShop without chugging down to 5 FPS. I've always viewed the performance of Nintendo games in the context of the hardware they're being played on, and as a result, I forgave Tears of the Kingdom a lot because yeah, it did run pretty badly a lot of the time, particularly when you were using the Ultra Hand building thing. But here, man, there is nothing to forgive. This looks so crisp, so beautiful. It runs absolutely flawlessly. To experience it like this, it honestly feels like I am playing it again for the very first time. So yeah, I know it's kind of lame to be excited about the prospect of finally playing old Nintendo games at decent frame rates, but that's honestly where I'm at, and I don't think it's too dissimilar to what we typically go through when we get a big PC upgrade. Like, if you're going from a GTX 1080 to a 4090 or whatever, what's the first thing you're booting up? It's probably gonna be something like Cyberpunk, because believe me, there's a big difference between experiencing that game on low-end hardware versus something that lets you turn on and crank everything. At that point, it feels like a different game, and for me, it's the same with Tears of the Kingdom. But I think this also relates to how I use my Switch. It's primarily my first-party Nintendo game device. That's what I use it for, exclusively. And so I'm not all that interested in how this thing runs Cyberpunk. I'm interested in how quickly Nintendo can turn around a 60 FPS patch for all the Xenoblade games, because when that happens, I will literally cry tears of joy. And that's the thing, right? Everyone has a different relationship with gaming hardware, and they have different expectations of it. Someone might look at the Xbox and say, oh, I wouldn't buy that, it has no exclusives. Whereas some other person might look at it and say, hey, that's the Game Pass machine, best value in gaming. It saves me hundreds of dollars each year. God bless you, Phil. Someone might look at a PC and think of all the work that goes into building, maintaining, and upgrading it and say, you know what, fuck that. While another person looks on in disgust at Cyberpunk running at a measly 60 FPS on a console while lovingly stroking their $2,000 GPU. For me, the Switch 2 is so far ticking the boxes that I had in mind when I imagined what it might be. It's a really fantastic handheld that delivers the right mix of size, profile, and weight. It feels incredibly premium, and I love picking it up. Its screen technology is a disappointment, but its internals are a big upgrade over last gen, and that not only enables the porting of a number of existing games, but also opens the door to new AAA games releasing on this device, including the likes of Borderlands 4 and FromSoft's The Dustbloods. People are going to put that power to use in different ways, but for me personally, I'm going to be putting it to use by playing new first-party offerings like Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bonanza when it's out, but also last-gen Switch games, which can now run at the sorts of resolutions and frame rates that would never have been possible on last-gen hardware. I do lament how incremental the Switch 2 feels, and I wish it had a little more of that Nintendo weirdness to it. I do wish this device was at least a little bit surprising, because very few companies have the capacity to surprise us quite like Nintendo can. Those surprises will have to come in the form of games, I guess, and if there's one thing that Nintendo has proven time and time again, it's that we can rely on them for that. This year alone brings Donkey Kong Bonanza, Metroid Prime 4, Kirby Air Riders, a new Pokemon game, and who knows what else. Yeah, this has been a particularly muted launch, but I think there's plenty to look forward to on the not too distant horizon. Alright, that's all I got. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. One question I often get is how to break into the world of content creation. There are a lot of ways to do it, of course: streaming, community building, YouTube, games media, many ways to cut your teeth. Obviously, my stuff eventually ends up on YouTube, but what if YouTube wasn't the right fit for you? What if you wanted to build your own independent gaming outlet or blog, allowing you to talk about games how you like, building a portfolio of work as you did so that you could one day leverage into different opportunities? Well, if you're just starting out, then can I suggest this video sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace lets you build professional-looking websites in minutes. You just select from their extensive list of pre-built templates, customize those templates to your desire, and boom, you're in business. If you can handle formatting a Word document or a PowerPoint slide, then you are already well and truly equipped to make a fantastic looking website through Squarespace. Once it's done and your content starts going up, Squarespace has all sorts of back-end tools to help you grow your site. Detailed analytics tools showcase what your audience is clicking on, and SEO tools and social media integration make it easier for your audience to find you. Recently, Squarespace took things to a whole new level. Their all-new design intelligence framework leverages their 2 decades of experience in website creation to give you even more tools to shape the website of your dreams, helping you with things like copywriting, tone of voice, product descriptions, and more. It's an easy-to-use end-to-end solution that could be the start of your content creation journey if the written word is something that interests you. If it is and you want to get started, then visit squarespace.com to start building your website through their free trial, and if you want to get serious, use offer code SKILLUP to get 10% off your purchase of a domain name. Thanks Squarespace for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.